Welcome to our session today. I don't remember the exact title that's in the agenda. I think it's SAAS, Show and Tell. We work in student academic and advisement services. So that is admissions, registration, financial aid, one-stop. So we work in the administration building, and we are a small team that supports the websites and programs for our department. My name is Rob Cook. Michael Kemp will be doing most of the presenting because he's we got the brains and the brawn today. And we have two students here with us today as well. Do you guys want to say hi? Yeah, and they do fantastic work for us, so we're glad that they're here to participate as well. We've been participating in some of the meetings that were referenced earlier today by Sherwin, some of the monthly chow and chats, things like that. We like to collaborate with other people and to see what we're doing. We do have we've kind of figured out what really works for us. The way we handle content, the way we handle development, the way we handle themes. We kind of have a style and a niche that really works for us. And as we've talked with Sherwin, a couple times and collaborated on different projects with different people, kind of explain like, oh, we do it this way, and that's sometimes good and that's sometimes bad, as Sherwin mentioned earlier too, right? When you're building something, there's 101 ways to do it. Each project we have is very different, and some of the things we do the same that really work for us, and then we'll try different things in projects too. One of the things that we do in our department is distributed content management, and that's probably something you guys do as well, where you guys are developing the sites and handing them off to people. We do have a concern about how much people have when we turn it over to them, so our sites are designed very much where when we turn it over to our content managers, we try to make it so they can't screw anything up. One of the things we do too is all of our people really are fascinated or interested in getting features. They want to have it be able to do this and do that and use all these other things. And when appropriate, we will go and find a module that does what we want and use that. Other times, we don't want all the bloat that comes with some community or distributed, what are they called? Contributed modules. And so sometimes we will just do something ourselves, and that's where, that's one of the things that Michael's kind of come up with, his methodology and how we do it. So each website that we launch has its own little module basically that has different blocks that do different things, and we can deploy them how and where we need them. And it's been really flexible and really scalable and really helpful to us. So I'll just get out of the way now, but introduce Michael. So Michael's worked with us 3 years now? 3 years. He's from Australia, so you'll get used to the accent pretty quickly. But Michael's been a fantastic addition to our team. He's already won a SAAS award, an innovation award in our department, and knew nothing about Drupal when he started. He said, hey, we need a Drupal person. He said, I don't know how to do programming. And so we said, well, you want to learn it? And he said, sure. So as far as, long-term expertise in Drupal, there's nothing like that. So as you guys are doing this, right, you might have more experience or less experience, but you can pick up on how we do things. One of the things Michael wanted to do today too is share examples and code with you guys so you guys can see. So if you haven't experienced or done some of these things before, you'll be able to walk out of today's session and be able to go and implement some of this stuff if you want to. So I'll get out of the way.
Okay, so first up, who here is not a BYU person? Okay, we have a few. I apologize because I hadn't really thought that far ahead, and so I have a little machine that's sitting in our office, and I just blew away what was on there. It runs CentOS version 7, and so I just installed Drupal on it yesterday and put this module together so that I could demonstrate some of the things that we were doing. So you can, if you're connected to the BYU secure wireless, or you're plugged into the network here, you can go to that website, which is 10.5.48.70, and you can play along. And there's a link just here that you can click, and it'll download a zipped version of the module that this is demonstrating. And if not, then Rob's email and my email are just there down the bottom of this screen. So michael_kemp@byu.edu. If you would like a copy of this and you aren't logged on to the secure, I don't think the general wireless will allow you to get to that URL. It's because it's just a box in my office. But if you would like a copy, just pop me an email and I can say, hey, I was at the Drupal camp presentation and we would like a copy of the module, and we can send it on. So primarily the problems that we have, or that I've seen over the last few years in working with Drupal, is some of the problems that was discussed in the last session, if you were in the theming session, where you download a theme or you create a theme, and then the theme with the HTML, the template and the page template basically give you the outline, and then every time you create a new content type, you have to create a new template file for that content type in order to get it to display more than just the display settings that are part of Drupal. So when you build a content type, is everyone familiar with that? You build a content type, you go into display settings, and there's half a dozen things that you can alter, like does it display a title next to it? Is it hidden? There's not really a lot. And then you pass off, like I do, to my students and say, here, write me some CSS to make this look beautiful, and that's when it becomes a nightmare, because there's not enough classes, you've just kind of displayed this content and thrown it onto the screen. And as I built this page, this front page here on purpose, it has a nice JPEG file which you can easily upload. You call it an image and you can have Drupal display that image. But then I wanted an icon for my page, so I have a little Drupal guy over there, and that's an SVG file. And Drupal doesn't really recognize SVG files as images, so you say, oh, I'll just upload it as a file. And once you do that, then how do you get Drupal to display that file as a file? So then you go in and you create a template file for your for this content type in order to, well, what happens is you end up with a mix of code in template files and in modules, and we kind of decided that we'll keep most of the code in the module side. So that's why every site that we develop, we create a module framework for, and that's just a .module and a .info file, and if you download the little test module, you'll see it's really just, a module just consists of a directory with 2 files in it. And then we start building, like, any odd thing that we need that isn't accomplished by the standard modules that we have installed, or any CSS tweaks that we need to add, or any odd content pages, we load that either with a block or with a menu page or that kind of thing. Now, have I lost anyone yet? Is everyone keeping up? No? Yes? Okay. So, this home page here, because I couldn't just display it as a standard page, because if I just turn on the features in Drupal, which people need to see that, or are we all familiar? Put your hand up if you need to see that. And so all I did was hide all of the content. I said to Drupal, when I go to this page, don't display any of the content. I'll handle that. And so down the bottom here is the code that displays that page. So basically, you write a little block in your module, you write a block module, and you put that block onto the front page, and when that block is called, it checks to see whether it's been called on a node, but you've forced that because you've got this block and you've positioned it with Drupal. And then you load the block, and you go through and you pull the elements together out of the block, and you can wrap them in different divs and whatever you need to display them on your page. So you've got all the variables that have come out of the database for this content type, and you just wrap them up, and then you send it out to the page, and it gets rendered like we see up here. Now, the benefits of doing that is you can not only render or output the HTML, you can add CSS to that, you can add JavaScript to that. So it really gives you a lot of freedom that you don't have necessarily in the template file, and you could do half of it in the template file, and then maybe you would need your JavaScript to run in another place. You run that in a module, and then you start to separate out all your bits of code. So to try and work out why this page behaves like it does, you've got bits in the template file, bits in a module, bits in a block, and it was just easier. We found it easier to put it all together into one place. So it's built, and any add-on stuff gets put together in the same place. So I have a list up the top of different things that we do or have done. So in a module, when you create a block, it's fairly simple. This module creates, so these two sections here, the hook block info and the hook block view, are the two hooks that you need in order to create a block. And this piece of code is creating 3 different blocks that, let me log in. So if I go up here to blocks, so on my blocks page I can see that I have a node list block, I have a front page block, and up here in my body top I have a show PDF file on node block. So these 3 things are what create those blocks and give them to me so I can access them throughout Drupal, and I can place them on pages using the block requirements. And each one of these just calls a function which returns the information that's needed by that for that block. So below here we have this show PDF helper function, which is called by the show PDF module, block module. And so we had a problem. We have a load of sites that people upload PDFs onto. Does anyone have any sites where people need to upload files? Yep. And what happens is these people will upload a file, and then they don't want to send their users off to a node that has the title of the node and the name of the PDF, which the user then has to click on. What these people, what our users want to do is just give them a direct link to the file. So they upload the file, and then they go back to one of their content pages, and within their content page they create a link that looks much like this, that has sites, default files, PDF files, drush cheat sheet.pdf, and when you click on that, that loads the PDF as you would expect, and they love that. The problem is that later on there's a new drush cheat sheet comes along, and so these people, they'll think, okay, well I'll go to the node and I'll upload the new cheat sheet. And then what happens?
I know.
Rob, tell me what happens.
So when you are uploading a new version of a file, and
So yeah, unless you delete the file so it's totally gone and upload it, and you upload a file with exactly the same name, this page that they created that has this file here, this link, stops working. And then they call us and they complain. And we go through some mechanism of trying to delete files for them so they can re-upload them, but it's not a very bulletproof method. You only need a file name change, and all of a sudden they've got to go back and find anywhere where they've linked to this file, and everything dies. So what we did was write this little, so what we tried to do was find a module to solve this issue. And we looked for modules that would take care of the file naming scheme, that could rename files, and we tried a few different workarounds, and in the end, we wrote this piece of code, which, you know, is a dozen lines of code, and we put that onto the node, so it's a block, and we put that onto the file node. And so when you go to the node that contains a file, this block runs, and this block says, let me look in this node. Oh, I've found a file in this node. Okay, it's a PDF file. It opens the PDF and displays it. So now, instead of linking directly to the file, our clients can use the link like this one here that go directly to the node on which the file lives. And when they go to that, instead of going to the node, it automatically opens the PDF. Now they can go back to that node at any time and they can replace the file. They can replace the file with any file name that they like. And we've forced it to be a PDF file. So they upload a PDF and you go to that node again, it will open the new PDF. And so rather than, so we're not opposed to contributed modules, but rather than look around and find a whole bunch of workarounds and modules that may or may not have done what we needed to, it came down to a dozen lines of code which fixed our problem. Yes? So an editor might take this link, like I've done, and stick it just in the body field of another page. So they've gone, they have uploaded their PDF, and then they've, so if I go into content here, so they go in here, and here's my PDF Drush cheat sheet, and I can see down the bottom what the URL for that is, and then I can paste that URL anywhere. I can copy that URL and paste it somewhere. But as soon as that file changes, that URL no longer exists, and so that's where they trip over themselves. So we wanted to get away from any need of them knowing what the file was, but still give them the same functionality, so that they had one link that they could put in and know that it was a bulletproof link because it links to this node that's containing the file, and then that code just looks for the file in that node and opens it up. So blocks are a fantastic thing. Another thing that we did is we did some work with the university catalogue, and we built out a taxonomy for the colleges and departments, and we had this information that we've all used taxonomies. Anyone who's not used a taxonomy? So taxonomies can be helpful, but they don't contain a lot of data. So we kind of cheated, and we went into the taxonomy and we set the description field to plain text, and then we pasted JSON in there. And so so we just created a basic taxonomy here, our taxonomy is called fonts. And our taxonomy has, so if I go into my structure here, I have my taxonomy, and it just has a bunch of fonts. They're all Google fonts. Now, if I wanted to create more data about these fonts, I could probably create a content type, but taxonomies are really useful and we can use them in a lot of ways. So it's nice to be able to have a taxonomy, but in order to be able to cheat and use that taxonomy and give it some more data, now we've used the description field to add some JSON. So now in my description I've got and the import, the Google import data, the font family data, I've got a color for this font, and I've got a font size. So now in my taxonomy, I can go with code and I can pull out, so this code here just requests a taxonomy and loops through it and gets the description field and decodes the JSON and then uses that JSON to be able to display the taxonomy, and then I'm just adding some quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog to show off the fonts. Now this isn't necessarily a great way to do things, but sometimes like the thinking outside the box gives you, it might be a problem that you've been working with, and it's just something that we kind of stumbled upon, and then we've only used it in one site so far, but it's something that is now in our toolkit of things that we may use in the future. Yeah, so I'm indenting it to demonstrate the parent-child relationship of the taxonomy. Taxonomies, so it's really quite simple to pull out a taxonomy in the code. So if you need to have a block where you're pulling out the taxonomy, it's really quite easy to pull it out, to loop through it, to do things with it. And so building a module and getting access to the taxonomy is really not very difficult at all. I then said to Rob, we need to kind of demonstrate views. And so in order to demonstrate views, you need to have some content to view. And I really didn't want to go through 2 hours of inputting content. So I created a simple content type which has some text, some Lorem Ipsum text. I didn't go as far as Lorem Bacon. Has some Lorem Ipsum text, and it has a taxonomy associated with it. So I said, here's a content type that just has my font taxonomy and some text. But I wanted to fill it up with some stuff. So adding nodes in code is also really quite simple. So this here, there's just this for loop. It creates a node and it grabs some, in the actual module you can see those bits of Lorem Ipsum text go on quite long, but it just takes a piece of text and it throws a random piece of text in there. And so I created 100 of these nodes with random font taxonomies associated with it. So this is another thing that you might find useful in your code. Sometimes you'll have a lot of data that you need to get into Drupal, and creating some code in order to write that data into your modules is really quite simple. Does anyone have any questions about writing? No? Sweet.
So I have a question.
Question away.
Why didn't you use the font generator?
Sorry?
The font generator.
Just because this gives me, I guess, because I've done this before to create actual content. When I'm reading in, when we created the course, the university catalogue, we had a lot of data that we had to read in. So I became very familiar with how to create modules using code. And so it was just as easy for me to take this and run this script and have it.
Well, and this is a fantastic example of how you do this in code, right? What Drupal's doing. So this is using all the API calls, it's not.
I'm not attaching. Yeah.
Exactly what Drupal does.
And this is the way to do it. There are a number of ways to skin a cat in Drupal, and I've been guilty of skinning them in bad ways. I have added stuff to the database. I have done, some really dreadful things. But when you use the actual Drupal calls like Drupal node load and Drupal node save, those things hit all the right buttons within Drupal. So Drupal takes care of everything for you. And so using these kinds of things rather than doing a half-baked way will keep you out of trouble. So I said to Rob, I need a view, and I need that view to give me all of my little text things, and I want a contextual filter that allows me to choose which font they use. So here's all my lorem ipsums that were Pacifico. And here are all my Roboto slab out of my view. Now, I had a problem because if I want Rob now to make use of the Roboto slab data that I've hidden in my taxonomy in the view, he really has no chance of being able to do that because of the way that I've hidden this data. And so sometimes views are great. It's a fantastic module, but sometimes just the layout that you get out of views may not be exactly what you want. So what I did is that you can run a view programmatically. So up here we get the arguments that are coming in from the command line, and then here we get here we run the view. So this is the name of the view, and I'm just running the view and getting the results of the view. And then I can loop through the results, and I can do what I did before. I can display them however I want. I can take them one node at a time, and I can pull out bits of the node that weren't even part of the view. I've got total access to be able to make display changes. So now if I go into my indie flower, you can see that I get to not only put the name, but I can put my lorem ipsum text in the font with the font size and the color that comes out of my taxonomy. So I can, with my view, I can say, oh, you're looking at this taxonomy. I can go and get the JSON. I can query the JSON. I can find out what font. I can find out the color and all those things I've hidden in my taxonomy, and I can then display it how I want. Okay. The other thing I can do is, if I don't want to use views, so here's just a list of every item that is in that content type. And I've used the taxonomy to make them look pretty or not so much. But I've used the taxonomy. Now, so with Drupal, we can run this entity query, return all the items from a specific content type, and then loop through that content type. So if views are, if you're happy with some SQL, or if views aren't doing it for you, you can take, you can just get all of the nodes from particular content type. This allows you to have some ifs and wheres in there, so you can say, I only want items in this content type that are of a particular type, or that have a particular field, or that have a particular field value, or that are published or that are not published. And you can spit them out, and then you can loop over them and display them in any way that you like. Now, all of this is fantastic, but how do you get this? I only showed 3 blocks to begin with, and I've been, showing you a number of different pages, and that's where the other main feature. So we work a lot with blocks, and blocks are great because they're a little piece of code, and you can decide on what page they're run, and you can embed in that block the ability to add some CSS if you want to change this page slightly, or to add some JavaScript if you want this page to run just a little bit differently, or you want to, like I did up here, create an overlay. So this little overlay tells me what font I'm using, and that is created with this little piece of jQuery down here. Does everyone use HereDoc to do their strings? That also is a wonderful thing. Does anyone not know what I'm talking about? Okay, so when you create a string that spans multiple lines and has a combination of single and double quotes, how do you do it? Right, it's a nightmare. But what you can do is you can use the HereDoc syntax, which allows you to start up here. So I have a variable JS here, and I put equals, and then 3 less than signs, and basically here's my end of HereDoc marker. So now my HereDoc is looking for a line that begins with JS, semicolon, and has nothing else after it. So all of this stuff, until it gets down to this line here, all of this stuff is put into this variable. I don't have to escape any of my string characters. I can input into here variables, so I can send PHP variables into there. So it's just a great way of being able to put a whole bunch of code together and not have to worry too much about what it contains.
The other, I guess it's a little silly, but the other reason I really like HereDoc is because I can format it in a way that makes sense, right? It still looks like the structure I want it to look like without having to turn on the whole string.
Yes. It can still look like code.
Yeah. I hate having it all, and then escaping characters is always a nightmare, especially if you've got double sequencing, triple sequencing, whatever.
Yeah.
HereDoc is actually agnostic. You use HereDoc with C, you use Python, Java. The implementations are all over different. This is an example of doing it with PHP. But HereDoc is actually a syntax cross.
Yeah, but it allows for multi-line strings and stuff without a whole bunch of the headache of having a whole bunch of adding to this thing with dot equal signs. No. So this is part of PHP will read through that and just grab the whole lot as a string. And then I am using the add JS down here, and I'm just taking that piece of JS and sticking it in line. So as Drupal reads down this, it grabs all this stuff, it's held in a variable, and then it just plunks it into my finished document in line. So the other thing that we use is pages. The hook menu item allows you to basically create a page on the fly. So, well, in code. So here I've got my first item here. The page name is taxonomy. So if I go up into my URL here and just put the word taxonomy, it will call this function here, MT taxonomy, which is a function that builds a whole bunch of HTML, and then using something like this in the function. So this is kind of the same syntax as at the bottom of most of these functions that export to the screen. It returns this value, and it just gets spat out within the framework that we have here. So if I go to taxonomy, this page here was created just here. And all I had to do was create a function. So this is a Drupal way of being able to create those extra pages that you need. And output stuff that, so you don't have there's no content type for this page. It just outputs whatever I want that's created in that little function that it's calling. So I can have my little here.doc string, and I can create a whole bunch of static HTML. But not only that, because I'm within Drupal, I can go and call and get information from modules, I can get information from nodes, I can get information from taxonomies, from different fields, and I can put that into my HTML, and then I can output it. And I still get all my Drupal header and my footer that all comes with this theme. All of that still gets displayed, but I can just spit it right out. So all I do is I have this my markup here, so I build a big HTML variable. Here I would have markup equals $HTML, and bam, it spits it out. And if you download this presentation or this module, you'll see that throughout there, just building a HTML string and spitting it out. The great part about pages, though, is that you don't always have to spit it out to you don't have to return it. And if you don't return it, if you just echo it, then you get none of, Drupal goes, okay, you're handling it yourself. You get to display basically anything. So if I go here to, so the front page of the university catalogue, this whole page, we wrote this in HTML. We pull in some data, but we didn't create a whole new theme to have the front page be different from the rest of the site. So if I go into colleges, we go into the rest of the site, which falls under the theme. It has a similar layout, we have departments, we have programs. They're all part of the theme and the templating and stuff that happens. But the front page, we wanted it to be spectacular, and we didn't want all of this other guff around there. So we wrote a page and we echo it to the screen, which enables us to do, have big hero images, to put a big search bar across the middle, to have something that breaks all the rules of what our templating engine or our template was going to be able to do. In here, and this is part of the module, if you want, you can click on here, and so now you have this little game of asteroids. So this is all written in. This is what I do in my spare time. Write old computer games. But this is being spat out by the Drupal module, just in a page. It's it's an HTML page. All I do in my module is read in the HTML and echo it to the screen. So I don't get any other things around it. You can pretty much have free reign. How are we going for time? Have I lost anyone? Are we keeping up? Just a couple of other things to touch on. Tokens. Someone mentioned tokens. I think Sherwin mentioned tokens this morning. Sometimes you want to create your own token. You want to have, and we've used it a few times for Google Analytics. So we'll create a specific token, and then you can pass that token off to Google when you do your Google Analytics and have that information saved. So Google Analytics expects with the module, it pretty much expects a token that you're putting in there. Here's some extra information and you tokenize it. So with a couple of code functions, the hook token info and the hook tokens, you can create your own token values, and then you can set them to be whatever you like. So here I've set it to have the role, so my Google Analytics thing pulls out whatever role that I have. So I could put this into my Google Analytics function, and then when I look at Google Analytics, it could see how many of my users were authenticated users, or how many of my users were anonymous users. So this allows you to get variables. You could actually go a lot more granular, but I think Google frown on actually putting people's names in there, so you might want to avoid going quite that granular. I had one other feature that I wanted to show you that we've done that we stumbled across that was pretty cool. So this feature here, so I'll finish on this and then you can ask questions. Sometimes you have a page that has a lot of computation behind it. This is true on the BYU catalog. If I go to the University Core, right? University Core has a lot of stuff in it. It's pretty involved, and it takes maybe 5 or 6 seconds to generate all that information and to put it together. And you don't want your users every time they go to BYU Core to take 5 or 6 seconds to be able to see that data. So Drupal gives you a fairly easy way when you're creating stuff to use the cache, or cache as you guys call it. Which are you comfortable with? Cache? Can I call it cache? Okay. So here's a demonstration of it. I can give it a cache name. So I can create as many of these cache names as I want to. I give it a name, and then I check to see if that cache, if I've got data in that cache, and if there is, I'm just going to set my HTML variable to whatever that data is. And I'm not going to do any more work. I'm just going to take whatever's in the cache and I'm going to spit it back. Otherwise, I'm going to do all of this work. So all of that stuff up here that gets generated with all of this work here. But once I've finished all of that work and I have my HTML, because I didn't find it in the cache, then I'm going to set it into the cache. So I've got my cache name, put my HTML value in there, and I set it to live for an hour. So then in an hour's time, someone's going to have, a 5-second load of the BYU, the core, University Core. Someone's got to put up with 5 seconds, but then for the next hour, everyone's going to get it fairly instantly. And the benefit with using this kind of cache is that if you go up to your Drupal thing and you flush all caches, that flushes that cache. So any values that you'd written into it, so you might be going, I'm doing little updates and they're not appearing. You just go and flush the cache and then they will appear. So you can flush those caches as part of the Drupal cache. So okay, I think I've been through all of my little things. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
I went back to what you were talking about for adding fields to the structure of the taxonomy.
I didn't. So I didn't add any fields. I didn't want to change the taxonomy necessarily or build it out. And we kind of stumbled across using this because there was some information. We'd already built out a taxonomy for the catalog situation, and it was after the fact we had all this stuff running. It was after the fact that I thought it'd be really nice to know there's some behind-the-scene variables that are in AIM that decide on what a college's department number is and what a department's number is. And so we tried pulling that out of the description with JSON, and it worked really well. And it's a fairly flat way of doing stuff. You can edit it really simply without having to change the structure of your taxonomy. So if you go, oh, I need another field in my JSON, I can just go and edit some text, and I don't have to re-edit. Or if I don't have if I want to get rid of a field, I can just get rid of it out of the JSON, and I don't have to upset the structure of the taxonomy. So that's, we went down it not for any really good reason, and I was at an Open West conference the other day, and they were doing a Postgres demonstration, and Postgres now enables you to have JSON fields, so you can create like a MongoDB database where you have just lines of JSON that you can actually search for and join on those fields. So I guess it's maybe a little futuristic, but I don't have a great reason for not just adding fields to the taxonomy, other than it gives a little more flexibility without breaking the taxonomy itself. So all of those things are really, Drupal makes it really easy to kind of do things. If you look through that demonstration, you'll often see that I'll do a print R with pre-tags around it to dump out what I get. So I'll get a node and I'll just print it out to the screen. So I can investigate the structure of it to find what I need. You can do that with taxonomies, you can print the stuff out, you can find the values of all the fields, you can find the values of the description. So all of those things you can get out and then reuse them the way you need to. So if we created it with fields rather than with JSON, it would have been a similar a bit of code in order to get that data out of fields rather than out of a JSON variable. Does that answer the question? Okay. Did anyone else have any questions? Did I confuse everyone? So we're not saying that this is the be-all and end-all. These are just some things that we've stumbled across as we've used Drupal, and we've found it to be a fairly flexible way of implementing just some simple things that we need to do on pages. So we have half a dozen sites that all use the same theme, but you can only get a certain amount into the template. Then the admission site wants some little thing that the registrar's site doesn't want. And financial aid want you to create a whole bunch of these calculators and do all this stuff. And so having a little block module, or a little module that we've created that can put a block on a page or that can create a new page for an individual site means that you don't have to have a bunch of redundancy in the theme to take care of the intricacies of each of the sites that use it. So here's my PDF files type, and on it, it just has a title that has the standard Drupal stuff, and it just has a file type of field_file. So what my block does is, which block did I have on? This one. So what it does is I put this block onto any page that is of type PDF file. So I just get my block and I say I want it to appear on every PDF file node. So that when you go to that node, this block finds what the file name is that's associated with it, makes sure that it gets a full URL and the path to that, and then it just writes to the header the file name and the stuff that it needs to in order for this PDF to basically load within the page. And then it quits out so that none of the extra stuff that Drupal would normally do gets run. If I were to do that, what I would probably be inclined to do is, if there was a bunch of information on the page as well as the PDF, people might want to actually go to the page. So what we were seeing was people were not going to the page. They didn't want to go to a page and they have to click on the PDF itself. They wanted to be able to go to the page and open the PDF. So if we had this simple case where it's just the file and the name of the file, I would reference that into a page so that you could go to a page and it would have the PDF there referenced, or you could put a link directly to the node that held the PDF, so that then you could have the best of both worlds. If they wanted to link directly to the node that had the PDF and have it open, that would be a different scenario to going to a page where the PDF was sitting there for them to click on. I think we're almost out of time. You guys probably need to go and get a drink or use the restroom before the next session. So thank you very much.